From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
Microsoft Exchange gets a visit from the ghost of Y2K. Uber email breach allows anyone to email as Uber. Can't see a problem there. And Morgan Stanley pays $60 million for leaving data behind. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's Cybersecurity Headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and most certainly some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Adam Glick, the CISO at Simply Safe. Adam, thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate you being here.
Hey, Rich, thanks for having me.
All right, before we get going, I want to thank our sponsor, DeepWatch, offering advanced managed detection and response to secure the distributed enterprise. Remember, you can join us on LinkedIn Live. Just go to CISOseries.com. The Week in Review page is there, and you can find the link to get in on the conversation. We have about 20 minutes, though, so let's dive right in. Microsoft Exchange Year 2022 bug breaks email delivery. It turns out you're not the only one rolling over the new year and getting it right. A bug in Microsoft Exchange FIPFS engine started blocking email delivery with on-premise servers as of midnight on January 1st. This was apparently due to Microsoft using a signed integer 32 variable to store the value of a date, which has a maximum value of 2.1 billion. That would seem like enough for a lot of things, but dates in 2022 have a minimum value of 2.2 billion. This caused the scanning engine to fail and not release mail for delivery. I'm sure everyone just thought everyone was taking it easy on email for the new year. So Adam, my question, we've had a similar story this week about, the same type of thing hitting clocks on Hondas and Acura cars. So not just Exchange, just probably the most notable. Are bugs like this predictable and searchable? And what does this reveal about further weaknesses about hosting email? I mean, it seemed like everyone was kind of caught off guard, and then it became obvious like right away.
Yeah, this is really a great story, and it's truly wild, right? In the year 2022, to still be dealing with these integer type bugs. It's unfortunate because it's a relatively difficult bug to find. How do we know what this is going to impact? Is it going to stop the flow of email? Is it going to stop a login? Is it going to be nothing? Is it just going to be something in a log somewhere on the back end? So they're kind of really hard to root out and actually find the impact of them. I didn't see too much buzz about this other than people having to patch it. Couple, some email flow broke here and there, but not a tremendous amount of buzz. I mean, the lesson here is in the year 2022, why are you still hosting your own email? I mean, come on, give it to someone else. Just stop it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a good thing that it, I guess, hit during a time when a lot of business email is down anyway, but I'm sure it was not great for admins that had to do that manual patch.
The timing could not have been worse, especially with Log4j and all the other fun we've all been having lately.
Always a fun time to be an admin. All right, next up here, Uber email breach allows anyone to email as Uber. Why be a spoofer when you could be the spoofee? This story is about a flaw discovered by a researcher that allows anyone to send emails on behalf of Uber sent from Uber servers. Given that 57 million Uber users and drivers had their information leaked in the 2016 data breach, there's a significant danger of those emails being used to ask for credit card details. I mean, it's basically just assumed that if you're signed up for any service, all of your emails have been leaked anyway. So I can see almost infinite ways that this could be abused. Seems like a very preventable type of flaw for the email thing specifically. Uber was slow to respond to this. Is there something that this should be a governance issue? Kind of wasn't an attack, just a built-in weakness of the system. Adam, I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, definitely slow to respond. But I can't speak to Uber and their response on this. In retrospect, it's really easy for us to go, hey, there could have been improvements in how you responded. You could have done it a little bit better, could have responded faster. But on the other hand, I also can't even begin to imagine the scale for which they receive security notifications. It's got to be hundreds of thousands a day of people just emailing Uber saying, hey, I saw this thing, and how do you separate the wheat from the chaff there without a human being actually interpreting them? Definitely an opportunity to improve. And I'm not going to eat our own here, right? But you got to sanitize your input. And I guess to actually answer your question, no, not sure it's a governance issue. If you mean like a regulatory or law standpoint, It's just an opportunity for improvement, in my opinion.
I guess the theme of our show, this is maybe like email's not great for all things. I'm not saying I love email. It's a standard, maybe not great for all things.
Yeah. Are we still emailing? Is it? I mean, when's the email done? When can we stop that?
Let's all move to proprietary platforms. That's obviously the answer to everything. Never a problem. All right, next up here, copycat and fad hackers will be the bane of supply chain security in 2022. Replicable attacks and a low barrier to entry will ensure the rate of supply chain attacks increases next year. That's according to cybersecurity researchers, not just my own opinion. The majority of threat actors are copycats today, and fad attacks, or kind of the attack of the day conducted by fast acting threat actors, are going to increase the number of supply chain intrusions next year. That's according to security researchers, just kind of looking at the lay of the land. This sounds like a similar situation to CVE announcements. It's kind of a race there to, if you got that proof of concept, maybe going and weaponizing that into a vulnerability, and who's going to get there first, the defenders or the attackers. Do you see an obligation for companies to race to conquer these fads? Or, when we're talking about the scale of these types of things, is kind of trying to chase the fad of the day, is that too big of an ask for organizations?
Yeah, security is always this game of building 11-foot walls to stop the 10-foot ladder. And what happens when they build that 11-foot ladder? It's like I got to have my 12-foot wall ready to go and ready to stand it up. You got to be mindful in what fads you chase. It's easy to let the tail wag the dog here. So you need to be cognizant at all times of which ones really make the news and which ones do I really need to tackle. I mean, we're seeing more and more vulnerabilities getting names. We're seeing more and more press about them. It's more and more out there, and we're having to respond to them. So it's becoming a lot more of a balance of, hey, which ones do I really truly have to tackle, and which ones are that's a fad. Maybe it's not as important. I've got to go about my basic blocking and tackling that I've done thus far.
Yeah, and that to me it seems like an overall theme that we've seen during this week in review show, where we find these exploits that seem very widespread, but then you look at what can people actually do with that information versus like how the cost of obtaining it, versus more specialized things that might be harder to pull off and but have like a much deeper penetration. It's it kind of going back to that Uber story. It's about how do you have all this threat intelligence coming in, assigning the proper weight to it and kind of acting on that. So definitely a challenge going forward, and don't want to get caught chasing fads too much, because then you kind of losing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, and you got to respond to them, right? There's big ones out that you absolutely have to respond to. It's just that ability to be cognizant of like, hey, how do I focus on the things that I've got to get done, the day-to-day stuff, the already priorities in my stack, and where do I balance this new fad, this new thing? Like, how do I find where that's going to be in my team from a prioritization standpoint?
All right, next up here, AT&T and Verizon respond to requests to delay 5G at airports. This is kind of the 5G will they, won't they, we've seen this week. So AT&T and Verizon initially announced this week that they would not comply with the request from the FAA and Department of Transportation to postpone deploying new 5G service in airport areas. The airlines argue that 5G signals use frequencies that are close to altitude sensing radar altimeters and could interfere with landing operations, while the carriers counter that they've already agreed to reduce power levels on these 5G signals, and the gaps in frequencies are adequate to prevent interference. Later in the week, the two carriers did agree to a 2-week postponement, but basically the carriers' line has been, hey, if you make us out to be the bad guys, we're not going to give you an inch for this going forward. Very much a high stakes battle, phone companies versus airlines. The carriers recently paid, tens of billions of dollars for the rights to use this 5G spectrum. Obviously, they want a return on that investment. Are you familiar with the effects of kind of the broad terms of what we're talking about here? Is this a moot point? Should telecoms follow? Is this two people being territorial about things they feel like they should have ownership of, or should telecoms just follow these guidelines out of caution until the FAA kind of makes that decision?
Is this the opportunity to make a 5G vaccine joke, or
Yeah.
skip right over it? I don't have a horse in this race, and I truly don't know enough about it. Right? We've got those folks on staff at Simply Safe who know all about signals and interference.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where not knowing what the thing is, obviously I understand the carriers made this investment, but when it comes, like, if there's a safety concern here, the question is this a, hey, what's the percentage of, if it's 0.001% more risk? I feel like the carriers do have a point. We're right now we're hearing a lot of the public talking points. We're not actually getting any data, which I think would actually help us make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. I remember, the long wait for getting Bluetooth on a plane or Wi-Fi on a plane, and I think this is just the same thing where the FAA has this overabundance of caution. I mean, the world in which they live in, they can't afford disasters. Like, they can't afford that interference. They can't afford that interference and that difficulty for finding your altitude or whatever it might be. So I get the wait here. I honestly truly don't know enough. I mean, hey, let's get 5G everywhere. I mean, I just don't know. I'm not the guy for this one.
Don't worry, we'll soon have our 5G streamed VR experiences on airlines before we know it.
That would
Before we
be
move
fun.
on to our next, before we move on to our next story, I want to spend a few moments with our sponsor, Deep Watch. Thank them for supporting the show. Increasing ransomware attacks and their evolving sophistication have been putting more pressure on security teams than ever before. Luckily, managed detection and response, or MDR, has emerged as a critical component for improving security operations, reducing ransomware risk, and minimizing the overall impact an attack can have. Visit deepwatch.com to see how they can help to prevent breaches for their customers by working together. All right, our next story here. The FTC warns of potential penalties for failing to fix Log4j flaws. On Tuesday this week, the Federal Trade Commission warned companies of possible legal repercussions for failing to remedy certain recently discovered Log4j open source software vulnerabilities. We've talked about them on the show at some length. As a cautionary tale, the FTC's notice cites the agency's $700 million settlement with Equifax in 2019 after the company was breached, exposing personal data of 147 million customers, resulting from failure to patch a common flaw. And with the exposure that Log4j got, I don't imagine anyone will have any sympathies in that regard. So it looks like, FTC or the powers that be regulators have learned a little bit from the SolarWinds and are starting to put more teeth into government oversight of cybersecurity. Adam, good thing, not enough? I'm curious about your thoughts.
I love to see it. I think it's about time we got serious about ramifications and companies lacking cyber hygiene. If a company gets popped because of Log4j, it's not because their security leader wasn't putting enough pressure on it. At least I hope not. It's because the organization made a conscious decision to deprioritize it or a conscious decision to disregard that pressure. So the only way we're going to get better is if it starts hitting bottom lines and people start realizing that there are real life consequences and real monetary issues with not, performing this level of cyber hygiene.
Yeah, and I know there's been, I know in a recent government defense bill, there's been some cyber provisions put in there, some of those lacking teeth. So it will be interesting to see if the FTC or other regulators in those vein kind of take the lead in pushing for that kind of, if not all out regulation, at least putting some penalty behind that going forward.
Yeah.
Next up here, New York AG warns of credential stuffing attacks. New York Attorney General Letitia James announced her office notified 17 businesses about the attacks, including online retailers, restaurant chains, and food delivery services. I feel like those are vague enough that we can all kind of guess which companies got notified, but they don't want to say for sure. This warning came from monitoring hacking forums containing customer login credentials, with the OAG collecting over 1.1 million credentials, apparently compromised in a credential stuffing attack. So, Adam, much like the previous story, government kind of taking a proactive role in security. Do you anticipate any pushback from the private sector or political opponents? It's the thing that stood out for me is the AG's office monitoring hacking forums for this information.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing new. It's kind of we're seeing that the first time from a legislative branch of the government, where previously we saw it in the executive branch. It's nothing new for the FBI to do that. I mean, credential stuffing attacks are a way of life now. You're going to have to defend it with strong authentication, strong authorization. It's just going to happen. So it's always interesting, right? Because there's always that balance between private sector and government, and where's that line for too much oversight or too much of them stepping in. But anywhere that we can see these experts, these people in these positions that can help us with greater, more vast resources, I like it. I enjoy it. I would love for the OAG to reach out to us and go, hey, we saw this thing. We saw your user accounts here. We saw this there. Like, wonderful. It's just another source for me to get intel, for me to take action on things. So I'm okay with it. I welcome it.
In that vein, I'm surprised we've started to see law enforcement partner with Have I Been Pwned and services like that, kind of breach exposure notification. I wonder when we're going to see an attorney general's office be like, hey, we want to proactively reach out. And this seems like that's the logical kind of connection between this story and kind of trends we're seeing with the FBI and European law enforcement too.
Yeah, I don't know when we'll see that, but you're right. I have seen more and more of an uptick, but I don't have great thoughts on that, but it's a good turn. I like to see it. Anywhere we can all get better, and if it comes from help from the government, I don't know who was that president that said, "I'm with the government. I'm here to help." I hope they're here to help. Actually,
it would be nice. Next up here, attackers exploit flaw in Google Docs' comments feature. Attackers are using the comments feature of Google Docs to send malicious links in a phishing campaign targeting primarily at Outlook users. Outlook Exchange, different. Okay, they're adding a comment to a document that mentions the targeted user with an @ which automatically sends an email to that person's inbox. That email contains malicious links and is difficult for an end user to kind of determine if it's malicious. So, Adam, fascinating to see how the bad guys kind of find weaknesses and exploit it. But could this not just be not the best managed for allowing employees more time to vet every email before they're reading it? I mean, I guess anytime you take a service and kind of automatically push something to email seems like potential for exploitation there, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And on the previous question, it wasn't a president. It was the actor Ronald Reagan, I think, right?
The actor?
The actor. This is a wildly interesting attack, right? The ingenuity of misusing legitimate services for evil is always this fascinating thing to me. I don't know how you would defend against this outside of a really strong awareness campaign to educate your population about the attack. I mean, you couldn't just turn off comments for outside your org without breaking collaboration. I'd assume that the best protection here when we think about like this type of attack is maybe there's a way to defang or rewrite the URLs when they're coming in, because there's got to be a hook, right? There's got to be a click here, do this, take an action. Like they're not just sending you nonsense. So,
yeah, it's some sort of Google kind of stepping up and saying, hey, we need to. If people are going to be doing this, we need some sort of engine to programmatically kind of look at these before we're automatically just pressing the button to push it to an inbox. Yeah,
I agree.
For sure.
Exactly that.
All right. And our last story here, Morgan Stanley agrees to $60 million settlement in a data breach lawsuit. This lawsuit summarized with improper disposal of decommissioned assets, specifically some legacy equipment that was decommissioned in 2016 and 2019 that contained the personally identifiable information that was not wiped clean prior to sale. Definitely a cautionary tale here, but also a huge headache for every company. Everybody's got old equipment laying around. I'm curious about your thoughts about how to deal with this and kind of any kind of overall lesson we can take.
Yeah, I don't remember if endpoint encryption was ubiquitous back in 2016. I think it was, and if it was, not a great look, right? And if it wasn't, also not a great look, I guess. Again, we're not here to eat our own, but it does go to show that proper asset decommissioning is a really important control. And in this fact, it's about a $60 million control. So you've got old stuff. Can't forget the basic stuff. You got to wipe hard drives. You can't just ship them off somewhere. You can't leave them sitting around. It's a toxic asset. Data is a toxic asset. Get rid of it.
Or just get a giant magnet and just kind of put
a
around
shooting range, a big incinerator, a drill press, all sorts of creative things.
And really, I mean, to me, that's an employee benefit. I feel like if I can take a sledgehammer to a hard drive, I mean, I feel like
health, get some stress out. Now we're talking.
Exactly. I'm going to actually now a side business, decommission your hardware, catharsis chamber. All right. Before we get out of here, Adam, any story that was a thumbs up or maybe an eye roller for you? Just something that stood out as particularly notable today.
I love the 2022, the Y2K22. Was that what it would be?
Y2K. Okay.
I think that's the one. That's a great story. I mean, it just goes to show you're never going to expect what you're going to get bit by. Got to stay on our toes.
Exactly. And speaking of staying on our toes, where can people stay on their toes and find out more about what you're up to?
You can find us at simplysafe.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. We have a ton of positions open. We're looking for a tremendous amount of engineers, mechanical engineers, software engineers, electrical engineers, security engineers, IT engineers, whatever you do. We're growing like crazy, and we'd love to have you come aboard the team. It's a fantastic organization, doing some great stuff, keeping every home secure.
Awesome. Great stuff. And thank you, Adam Glick, the CISO with Simply Safe. Very much appreciate your time. This was great. And we also want to thank our sponsor, DeepWatch, offering advanced managed detection and response to secure the distributed enterprise. One kind of quick programming note, the CISO series video chats will return January 21st, but you can register now to attend right now, which is right now, over at CISOseries.com. And remember, you can get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every day. It's about 6 minutes long and get you caught up on all the stories you need to know. Until then, next week, I'll see you. I'm Rich Straffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.